Counseling, the helping relationship. A videotape production designed to provide the counselor with a framework for assisting a person in answering the question, what shall I do? And in assuming responsibility for the course of action he decides to take. John Carter is Assistant Professor of Applied Behavioral Science at Case Western Reserve University Dental School in Cleveland. He received his Ph.D. from the Department of Organizational Behavior at Case Western Reserve. He has also completed the 3-year postgraduate training program at the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland and is presently chairman of its board of trustees. The purpose of this presentation is to make John's knowledge and expertise available to a broader range of people. Each tape module includes counseling sessions with 2 clients and John's commentary on issues and problems encountered by the counselor.
The purpose of this presentation is to provide you with a conceptual framework and techniques which can serve as a guide for assisting individuals seeking counseling. There are many reasons why people seek counseling within an office. Sometimes they merely need technical advice or business information. At other times, they may be looking for a sounding board, for help in clarifying their ideas, or for support of a decision already made. They may be searching for someone to tell them what to do, so they don't have to figure that out for themselves. And some people have reasons which cannot be classified as counseling, like wanting an excuse to spend time with a counselor. There are 4 steps that are essential in any counseling process. The first step is to discover what the client wants and needs. The second is to find out how you can be of specific assistance to the client. These 2 processes are sometimes the most difficult. They are also the most crucial. Without a clear and mutual understanding of the client's needs and your ability to help him meet those needs, you'll be wasting both your time and his, and possibly creating more problems for the client than he had when he walked in. The third step is to decide how best to respond. You may have a number of alternatives in any one situation, such as responding on an emotional level versus a rational level, or responding as a friend rather than as a supervisor. Whatever choice you make, it needs to be clear both to you and to the individual you're counseling. Unfortunately, the counseling process often ends with the counselor's response. This leaves you, the counselor, with little or no idea about whether or not you have really been helpful. And it does not allow your client to evaluate your helpfulness in your presence so that a new course of action might be taken when the first does not work. Therefore, it's essential that you ask the client to respond to your response, to give you feedback on whether or not he has obtained what he wanted. There are 5 issues that the counselor needs to be concerned about when involved in a helping relationship. 1 is to be sure that the physical setting allows you and your client to be at ease and in full view of each other. This is important in all counseling situations except when someone is merely seeking technical advice. When both parties can see one another clearly, the counselor can observe the physical gestures that often clue him to the emotions which lie beneath the client's words, and the client can more easily pick up the most critical elements in the counseling relationship, acceptance and empathy. This is the second issue of concern for the counselor. If the counselor lacks these feelings for his client, then he should not be working with him. A third issue is the possibility of role confusion or conflict. This occurs when one of your other organizational roles, such as supervisor, interferes with your ability to counsel your client. In order to be an effective counselor, you must be clear in your own mind when you are functioning as a counselor and when you have moved into one of your other roles. And this must be shared with your client. As a counselor, there is no way for you to not bring your own needs to the counseling situation. The 2 which most often interfere with being a good counselor are the need to be helpful and the need to be competent. While these and other personal needs don't necessarily have to get in the way, they often do. So again, to be an effective counselor, you must learn to be aware of how your needs may be interfering with your client's needs, and you need to be able to share this with your client. The final issue of concern is time. The time available to a counselor and his client is important in that it determines in part the nature and extent of the interaction possible. The amount necessary for fully dealing with the client's needs should be clarified as early as possible. If time is too limited for good counseling to occur, then the session should be postponed. Let's take a look at 4 counseling sessions which illustrate how I use this basic framework and some of the issues I encounter in the counseling process. The first counseling session is with Brian, who is seeking technical advice and information. The resources available to me as a counselor in responding to Brian include referral and providing information and clarification. One of the issues dealt with during the session is that of physical setting.
Hi, John.
Hi, Brian.
Got a few seconds?
Sure.
All right, I'd like to just touch base with you on a bit of a problem we have and, the job we're working on right now. Maybe you can help me on it. The client, as you may recall yourself, records his depreciation on his fixed assets on a straight line basis. And
Who is the client? Which client?
It's the Munn Company.
Okay.
Yeah. We found, though, in taking a look at what they've been doing with the additions during the year that we're auditing, that despite the fact that quite a few of these additions have occurred towards the end of the year, taken the full year's depreciation, which, of course, is not consistent with their normal practice, and I think distorts the picture somewhat, and I'm not quite sure how we should tackle it. Do we push for a change? Because I know the client doesn't want to change it. He's already reported his original figures back to the parent company, and yet it doesn't seem right to me to just let the thing ride, so I'd appreciate getting some advice on that.
I could respond to that, but I think that Al Butler would probably be able to give you a better response than myself. He's been working on a case very similar to that, and why don't you give him a call?
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
Right now.
Okay.
It's 176.
176. Sure. Oh, Al? Yeah, how are you?
Did you get the advice you needed?
Yeah.
I'm glad I had you calling, man.
Yeah.
Is there anything else I can help you with this morning?
Well, maybe if, since we are together and you have a few minutes, there is something I'd like to bring up with you.
Something else technical? Or?
No, it's more of a personal thing, John.
Come around.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, this is something that's been bothering me for quite some time, as a matter of fact. You know, I've been with the firm now, I guess, 3 years or so. We've had a few chats before about my progress and about my assessments, which have been pretty good, actually, I think, and very little criticism. We've talked about 1 or 2 points where I can improve, and I guess we're all in the same boat in the sense that we all have some weaknesses. But I've been working on those, and I think I'm pretty well up to scratch, and I've got those particular problems licked, and yet, despite that, and the fact that I've been around for quite some time, I still haven't had any indication of promotion, and I just don't understand this. It doesn't seem to fit the feedback I've been getting all along, and yet somehow things are just not working out apparently, and I'd appreciate knowing a little more about this.
Well, when you say knowing a little more about it, can you share more with me about what you want from me at this point?
Yeah. Frankly, I'd like you to tell me if you can, or if you will, just why am I not being promoted?
Okay, I think I could share some of my own perceptions and feelings about that, Brian. I think that when you talk about doing a good job, because I think that at least what I hear in my own perception of you in the office is that you have done a good job. And I think that what we tend to do is we give out basically data that says these are very concrete things that you need to do to take care of your responsibilities. And if you fulfill those, what that does is to basically make you eligible for a promotion. And I think that, there's no question, as you said, that you have pretty much fulfilled those as time has gone along and if, taking care of your own objectives and goals that you set with others in the office. I think what happens with that is that only makes you eligible for promotion. Doing those things doesn't get you promoted, as it's clear that you're aware of and having some feelings about that at this point.
Yes.
And one of the things that has to do with is I'm sure that you're aware that you're competing with others in the office, and that there aren't always enough positions to promote everyone who's eligible for promotion. As much as I and I think most of the other people in the office would like to have that take place. And so often people get promoted on what I call very soft data. It's not the very concrete things that you do that we can measure. And I'm not really sure myself, what criteria have been used in that way that may have affected your being promoted or not being promoted. And the one thing that I am aware of is I know and have knowledge because I've heard that you leave the office most of the time around 5 o'clock, and that most of the people in the office, in fact I would say the vast majority of people in the office, work until 6 o'clock. And given what I perceive, and is my perception of the sort of operative value system in this office, it is sort of assumed that individuals will work until 6 o'clock. My assumption is that you're not working until 6 o'clock would be interpreted by a lot of different people in the office as lacking commitment and lacking enthusiasm. Now I want to make clear that that's speculation on my part, and that's my perception of things. But I think that you could check that out with your supervisor and see if that has in fact affected your promotion in any way. I think you could get that information.
I'd like to respond to this because when I joined the firm, I got a manual which set out the various conditions of employment, and I discussed it at some length with the people who hired me. And as you know, the official hours of this office works 8 o'clock in the morning till 5. And I think you'd agree that from the information you have that I'm working to those hours. I agree with you that generally speaking I don't work much past 5 o'clock, and I know some of my colleagues do, but I think what's more important is that I'm using that time between 8 and 5 pretty effectively. And frankly, in my opinion, some of the people who are working past that time are perhaps doing so because they're not using it so effectively. But I guess the basic point I'm making is that I was told what the hours were, and I worked them, and I used them effectively. So I'm a bit concerned about this response I'm getting from you on this point.
Well, I can understand that. I think that one of the dilemmas that you're caught in, and I experience often, is that we're often given sort of very concrete data about what's expected of us. And what's not given is what I label information, which is how is that data interpreted And what does it mean in terms of consequences for me or consequences for others in terms of the way that it's interpreted?
Yeah.
So basically you were told and understood that the working hours were from 8 to 5. And it sounds like the assumption that you made was that as long as you took care of your responsibilities in that period of time, and it sounds like you even feel like you've gone beyond that, and particularly have been more productive than some individuals who were working until 6 o'clock, that that was commitment enough and that you had done enough. Regardless of that, I think that what happens in this office is that because of the way that you're not working until 6 o'clock is perceived by some individuals, that that may have affected your not being promoted. And I think the piece of information that may have been missing for you is that not working until 6 o'clock is clearly taken into consideration in some way by most of those doing evaluation.
Well, I think that makes it clearer to me, and I appreciate that. And thanks very much for your help, in fact. I think I've got some idea where I should go from here in this area.
Okay, let me just say one other thing to you.